All right, Vince, with that, are you ready for rapid fire?
I am so ready for rapid fire. When I read your questions today, it got me a little excited on some of them.
All right. I'm glad. So Mike Denbrock, of course, new offensive coordinator for Notre Dame, asked how important running the ball is to success for the Fighting Irish and their offense. Here's what he had to say.
I do believe that still, and I think everything that you do has to be built around a strong running game. And now, does that mean that it's going to be 60 times a game? It doesn't mean that. I mean, it means that when we do call runs, that we give our guys a chance, right? Numbers-wise, number one. Number two, we put them in a position from a scheme standpoint to take advantage of what the defense is trying to do, and then we execute it. But I think any great offense revolves around the ability to be able to run the ball. Now, with having said that, I will say that I think I'm more open than I was years ago to not just pounding my head against a brick wall and just understanding that the game has changed, and the more athletes you can get out in space and create mismatches is also a good way to play offense. So there'll be a good balance of that, and there'll be afternoons where we run it 50 times, and there'll be afternoons where we may throw it 50.
So that's Mike Denbrock. Father David says, get a new picture of Coach Denbrock.
We don't like all that purple
uniform
Ugly.
Right now. Yeah. Anything stand out to you, Vince? What you heard there?
Well, first of all, it's good football to have to know that you need a running game to open up your pass game. That's just good football, right?
Mm-hmm.
What stood out to me, and I guess I'm not overly surprised, but he said you don't just have to run between the tackles to have a good run game, because getting the ball to the perimeter is also an extension of the run game. And we've talked about that so many times on Upon Further Review about the run game and what it looks like and what extensions of the run game and all those different things. So it's not just going to be handing the ball off and be like, oh, we got to run the ball. We got to run the ball. It's going to look different, which I think is huge. Absolutely huge. And you can tell that Mike Denbrock's been around the block. He knows what he needs to do to kind of get an offense going. And I love that. I love it.
His offensive philosophy has evolved since he was here with Brian Kelly the last time, because he was essentially running Brian Kelly's, calling plays out of Brian Kelly's offense. And, it wasn't his offense. He went to Cincinnati and he actually, was able to sort of formulate his own offense, his own approach. And you heard him talk about getting guys out in space. And to me, like we had the people ask last week about, 11 personnel and stuff, like where Mike Denbrock talked about 11, like standing there listening to him, he never mentioned any, personnel packages, 10, 11, 12, 21, any of that.
Because he's not going to paint himself into a box like that.
This was the closest thing that he came to that. And hearing him talk about athletes out in space, I think that, is maybe where that reference came from. Like, to me, it means you don't have to have an extra tight end on the field to run the football. It's just what you said. Exactly. You don't have to run the ball between the tackles to run the football. There are a lot of different things that you can do about it and or do with it. And we've talked about it before, especially when Tommy Rees was here, but even this year as well with Jared Parker. There was less of it, I think, with Jared Parker, definitely more with Tommy Rees. Like, all you're doing by bringing that extra tight end on the field is bringing more hats into the box. And that, to me, makes it more difficult for you to run the football. So that's not how it's a very old school way of thinking, I think, to think that you have to have an extra tight end out there to run the football. So as he said, formationally, you can do different things and still be very effective running the football. It doesn't all have to look the same. And I think the way college football has evolved,
oh my gosh,
there's a lot more of that than maybe what we've seen here at Notre Dame the last few years.
Oh, I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised. I really do. Just based on what the offense is, what could and will look like with Denbrock at the helm. It's going to be, can't wait.
Yep. All right. So we also, of course, got to talk to Max Bullough, the new linebackers coach, recently, and he was asked about spring priorities, and specifically, is spring about seeing like how many positions these linebackers can play? Because, we've seen a lot about, cross training in the last few years. Is spring about doing that, or is it about saying, hey, this is your position, now let's build the depth chart around that? Here is how Max Bullough responded to that.
That varies person by person,
okay,
player by player. The young guys will try to get them in a spot, get them to learn it, get them to be comfortable in one spot. Then there's guys like Jack Kaiser, even Drayk Bowen, that have to know. Like, we have to be able to put you in there with different people, and you have to be able to play the complementary position to them. Like Jalen Sneed, Jaden Osbury are going to be at Rover, you know what I mean? Or they're going to be at money. Whereas if it's Kaiser and Drayk in there, you know, Kaiser's probably the money. But if it's Kaiser and Sneed in there, Sneed's the money, Kaiser's the Mac. So to answer your question, there's like two different, I wouldn't say tiers, there's two different groups. Yeah. One group, hey, you got to know it all, because I got to be able to grab you by the helmet and throw you out there. Whoever's out there, you got to go to the other spot. And then there's the young guys or other guys that are specialized in certain areas, have a certain skill set that we'll try to lock in one spot.
At least Max Bullough is wearing Notre Dame gear in his photo, I guess. You know, Father David can be happy about that.
He loves to pound that table.
Yeah. Before I ask you the questions, I want to note something, because you probably heard a couple new terms in there. He talked about the Mac and the money position.
Yes.
If you picked up on that. So Mac and the money are the nickel package. So when the nickelback is on the field, instead of Will and Mike, you have the Mac and the money linebacker. So those become essentially different positions themselves. So those are the two basically, money is the Will linebacker, Mac is the middle linebacker in the nickel package. In the base package, it's just the same as it's always been. So just wanted to explain that.
Okay. So basically the money is the Will in the dime or in the nickel package.
In the nickel. Right.
Okay. Gotcha.
Right. Yeah,
which makes sense.
He didn't go into dime package, but yeah.
Right.
But
which makes sense. I mean,
yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
So just kind of explaining that, the general philosophy that he was talking about, does that feel like a shift to you compared to what we've kind of seen, especially specific to the linebackers the last few years?
It's a huge shift, because before all we ever heard was everybody has to know everything.
Right.
And so we had a bunch of jack of all trades, master of none, which I mean, could you say that the defense has been successful? Sure. But at the same time, I personally subscribe to the theory that you get really freaking good at one position. And if that's the case, then you can start learning some other stuff.
Right. Especially as a freshman walking in the door.
Right. Exactly. It's
because it's one thing to be J.D. Bertrand and Maris Leofau and Jack Kaiser, who've been around for a few years.
Right.
When you're walking in the door your first spring, I don't think you need to be focused on trying to play three different positions. I think, as you said, you need to learn one the best you can, get as good as you can at that, and then start branching out after that.
And it's like, algebra, right? You learn your algebra before you move on to calculus. You got to have a good foundation before you can move on. And that's exactly how I feel about linebacker play, or any football position for that matter, right? Now, wide receiver is a little bit different. You can learn all three wide receiver positions, I think, and still be okay, because it lends itself to that. But at linebacker, man, learn one. And I'm glad that that's going to be the focus. And he specifically said 2 guys are going to learn more than one position, essentially, Kaiser and Drayk Bowen. And I thought that was interesting too.
And that leads me to my next question. But just making sure, because I can't remember which freshman linebacker it was last year, but I remember asking him specifically the question about, what are you focused on right now? He's like, well, I'm learning all three. And it's like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Why are you having freshmen do that in their first spring when they're early enrollees, first spring on campus? So I think it's great that, like, hearing him talk about that sort of basically saying the younger you are and the more raw you are, you're going to focus on one thing, get good. And then once you're good at that, then you're going to move on to the next thing. I think simplifying makes a lot of sense. But then you heard him talk about Drayk Bowen. Does it sound like he's kind of the front runner, like the guy to beat at the mic right now?
He used his name and Kaiser's name in the same sentence. I feel like that tells you a lot.
Yes.
You know what I mean? He kind of put those two in like a different category from everybody else. I mean, he basically said, he's like, you got 2 groups. You got these 2 and you got everybody else.
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
To me, there's the starters. Here's everybody else. Like, I feel like that's kind of where things stand right now. And I'm not overly surprised about that.
Yeah, now, there were other, obviously, questions that he got where he talked about, some other guys like Jalen Sneed, Jaden Osbury. Those are kind of the top two guys, it sounds like, at the Rover right now. Now, that doesn't mean that those guys, again, because they've been around for a little bit, might not, mix in and, especially in different sub packages and stuff like that, kind of see where they fit at some other positions. But yeah, I mean, it sure sounds to me like Drayk Bowen is right up there at the top, and Jack Kaiser, because of where he, and he talked about Kaiser being bulked up a little bit more and, sort of being able to hold his own more. He's up closer to 230 right now. So he's added a little beef, and it's amazing that Drayk Bowen, especially for as fast as he is like even bigger than that. He's up around, 240. So that guy,
I wouldn't want to be the catcher in the way of him at home plate. Just to throw that out there.
No kidding.
I would say Kaiser is now making his body one where I think he will be a very good Will, and I think Drayk Bowen will be a very good Mike. And I think the battle is on for Rover. Like that's how I feel where things are.
I agree for sure. Brent, I don't know if Brent left us or not, but he was, throwing this out there earlier. He said Dallas visits the 49ers again in 2024. What say you? I don't know if you're trying to get me to come out there and hang or something, but like if you want to buy the tickets, Brent, I'd be more than glad to come out there and, like watch you and Jesse beat each other up in the parking lot or something before Cowboys 49ers. But where I stand right now, I'm not spending, very much money on anything Cowboys related, if that's what you were alluding to. So. Holtz my beer. This goes back to the main topic earlier in the show. He says, when the ACC inevitably implodes, what does Notre Dame do? Where do they go? Land a similar deal with the Big 12? Big 10 will say no chance without full membership. Same with the SEC. Vince, your answer.
This is easy, honestly, for me. They go back to the Big East. If you look at the members of the Big East right now, it's a great basketball conference. It's a great basketball conference, at least on the men's side. I can't really speak to the women's side. Maybe you can do that better than I can. But if you look, you got
women's side is mostly UConn, but you've got like Marquette and Creighton as solid teams.
Marquette, Creighton, DePaul, Butler, Xavier, Georgetown, Villanova, Seton Hall, St. John's, Providence, and UConn. That's where you send your
all the Catholic schools.
That's where you send your Olympic sports. 100%.
Stay. Yeah.
I don't even think I think it's a no-brainer
football
because they don't have football. So there you go. I think the answer is right there in front of you. And to be honest with you, outside of women's basketball, there might be a better conference all around. Man,
the only question would be if it comes to that, because now everyone is going to be ticked off that you're, like everything, whatever has, like the ACC is going to be blaming, Notre Dame for them falling apart because Notre Dame wouldn't sign up full force. The Big 10 is going to be mad at them because they won't join the Big 10. Like, are you, again, like as of right now, what Jack Swarbrick says was everyone's lining up to schedule Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. Are you still going to be able to put together a good year in and year out schedule remaining independent in football? Or is everyone going to be ticked off enough at you that they're going to say, no, I don't want to play you?
They will be ticked off to a degree until they realize how much money they can make when Notre Dame comes to town.
That's right.
That's it. I'm sorry, but people
they're going to sell out their stadium still, just like the ACC. Like again, it's like the ACC. Now I get it. The conference commissioner would prefer that Notre Dame is a full-fledged member, but he's also, like the actual athletic directors. I don't think they're that, they're that upset when Notre Dame comes to town and they sell out their stadium for that game. Right?
How happy was the ACC?
The fact that they get on national TV most of the time in the process.
How happy was the ACC when Notre Dame had to join their conference for a year, right? I mean, they were over the moon. They were ecstatic.
Yeah.
And it was great for all parties.
And that's why they want them full time.
That's exactly why they want them full time. Teams in the Big 10 may be upset. Teams in the SEC may be upset, but they will continue to schedule Notre Dame. Just mark my words.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably the only thing. Now, again, remember, as of right now, until and unless Florida State actually finds a way out of this grant of rights. The grant of rights still lasts massive. Like 13 more years.
Yeah.
So like it at least for right now, Notre Dame's involvement helps keep the ACC together and helps them get as much money as they're getting. But that's like Notre Dame joining the ACC potentially full-time 13 years from now, if it came to that might be the only thing that keeps the ACC together beyond 2036 is if they could actually get Notre Dame to join up. I don't think it's going to happen, but that's probably the only thing that's going to keep the ACC together at this point.
Yeah, you're probably not wrong. Unfortunately, I just don't see Notre Dame doing it. I mean, they try to help out the ACC every chance they get. They do, but I don't know that they're going to go that far. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't see it.
So speaking of, I guess we weren't talking about the SEC. We were earlier. We were just talking about the ACC. But SEC Commissioner, I was adding an extra C. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey has a proposal to unclutter the busy month of December. The plan would make the entire month of December a dead period for recruiting. Now, as of right now, the last 2 weeks of December are a recruiting dead period, but this plan would make the entire month a dead period. Mm-hmm. It would also move the early signing period up from the middle of December to the first week of the month. So the early signing period would be after the end of the regular season, but right away in that first month of December before the conference championship games are played. They would also change the transfer portal. Now, they haven't decided nothing has been decided, but this proposal would potentially eliminate the December window altogether and only have the spring window for the transfer portal. So what do you think about this?
There are so many,
and you might need to take it point by point, because there are 3 different points here, obviously.
You know, as far as the entire month of December being a dead period for recruiting, honestly, I'm fine with that, because especially with the 12-team playoff, if you're in the playoff, if you're one of the 12 teams in the play, you need to be preparing for the playoff. Like it stinks when you have to pull double duty, right? When you have to split your focus between recruiting and preparing. And so making the entire month of December a dead period, I'm actually okay with that.
And this proposal is sort of with an eye on the fact that the playoff is expanding, and you're going to have even more going on in December now.
Because if you're not in the playoff, you've got a kind of a one-up on those teams that are in the playoff, because you can just focus entirely on recruiting and whatever crap-ass bowl game that you got into. And so I do like the December dead period. So that point number 1, I'll give a thumbs up.
Okay, I'm with you there.
Okay, point number 2, the early signing period. I'm fine with that too. And in fact, I am a proponent of moving the early signing period to August, so it's before the senior years of these guys, so that they don't have to worry about all the garbage during their senior year. Most of these guys know where they're going.
I agree with that, like late July or early August.
Yeah, right.
The article I read at Yahoo Sports, Ross Dellinger had it, and he talked directly to Greg Sankey. Sankey mentioned there's been stuff floated around about moving the early period to June, which I had not heard before.
That's
reading
early.
These.
Okay.
But high school coaches, specifically high school coaches in Texas, which is obviously a hotbed, don't seem that hot on the month of June. I don't know why, June as opposed to late July or August, because that seems really early.
That's a little early for me too. Yeah. Because there's a lot of stuff that happens in summertime. There are a lot of guys that get scholarship offers in the summertime. You know what I mean? So I would still,
you're going to camps and stuff like that still.
I would still want that summertime for these guys to, some of these late bloomers, that kind of stuff. Like I would still want that. Like, for example, I can only use my own example, right? My own experience. Like, we're planning on going to these different camps in June, so that because all these schools want to see my kid kick in person. They want to see it with their own eyes. That's all in June. So if they have the early signing period, some of those spots might be taken. You know what I mean? So I would push it to the end of the summer, and I think that would be good. But they're moving it up a little bit. I would give it like a half thumbs up, like a sideways thumb. I would still.
No, I agree. Like, seems like you're still evaluating in June. Again, like that's when the camps are for the most part. Like, why? I don't think that there's any reason to move it up that far. Late July, early August, but
yeah.
So I'll be curious to see exactly where that goes. I don't mind moving it to like the first week of December as opposed to the middle of December. If that's the only, like, if that's maybe sort of an incremental option right now to at least move it up a little bit, get it done, and then make the rest of the month a dead period. I don't mind that as much, but I agree. I would still rather have it like late July or early August.
Because most high school teams, at least in the North, are done by December, like with their high school seasons. And so that's why you would put it there. Like, I would not want the signing period to be in the middle of the season. Like, that's kind of crazy. So it either have to be before or after. But there's still plenty of high school kids that are playing in December too. So, or in that early part of December in the warmer states, right? So I don't know. I just I'm still a proponent of doing it before the season starts. Let these guys have their senior year.
I think that makes sense. The portal thing.
Yeah, this is where I have a big problem, actually.
Because I think that, there's obviously there's a benefit for everyone to getting the transfer portal going in December, so that, and you obviously, it's hard to push it later in December because you want these guys to have their decisions made so they can enroll.
They can enroll.
Like Riley Leonard and RJ Oben and Jordan Clark. Right.
That's the issue. That's the 100% issue. Yes, you can have a dead period, but it's not dead for transfers. I still think that you need to be able to recruit these transfers because they need to be able to enroll first week of January sometimes.
High school dead period, but transfers have to be handled differently.
Because you want those transfers to be here in the spring, and if they can't enroll in January, they're not going to be here in the spring. Yeah. So it totally shoots down the whole transfer portal thing. I would not like that at all.
I would have to think that there is more benefit to keeping a transfer portal window open in December than there is just pushing the whole thing to the end of spring, because I realize you have more time on your hands at the end of spring. But again, like, if you're having spring practice and you've got a new quarterback, for example, you're bringing in a quarterback, you want that guy to be on campus with your team in the spring and not have to wait until summer, after the spring is over. Like, you're wasting everybody's time potentially by pushing it to the end of spring practice and doing
Absolutely. 100%. Because you got a bunch of false competitions and, all these different things. And why would you want to wait to see who's going to be where until the fall? And now you're preventing a lot of these guys from the spring to transfer, frankly. If they get beat out and they're not going to play, they usually find that out in the spring, and then they can jump in the portal and do their own thing. If they don't find out till the fall, now they're stuck for another year. And so if you're truly trying to be for the players, you can't do that. You can't do that.
Concur. Bears quarterback Justin Fields said on the St. Brown Brothers podcast with Amon Ra and Equanimous.
Of course they have a podcast.
I know, right? That it's no big deal that he has unfollowed the Bears and the NFL on Instagram. Fields says just because you don't follow the girl on IG doesn't mean you're not messing around with her. And, this kind of whole thing, it blew up over the weekend. Do you buy or sell Justin Fields' explanation?
I sell social media in general because people read too much into
that's part of his explanation, is like people read too much into the social media. They're basing too much on it.
At the same time, if you're going to be on social media and you're going to be a public figure, you got to be smart about what you're doing.
That people are going to read too much into it. So
100% sell his excuse because he knew damn well what he was doing.
Right.
You have to try to unfollow somebody, first of all.
Right.
Like it's a challenge. Like I always tell these kids when I am in my office, like, you got to try to fail as bad as you're failing right now. Like, you have to try to go in and unfollow people. It doesn't just accidentally happen. You know what I mean? He knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I don't buy it even a little bit. He's kind of being childish about the whole thing.
No, I know. Like you can try to play it off and whatever. You're absolutely like there is a mute function on social media, right? You don't have to
right.
You don't have to unfollow some. You can just mute because like his whole thing is I don't want that in my timeline because it's too much drama and that's all I'm seeing and I just want to, separate myself from that so that I'm away from the drama. He just wants to get it over with is what he's saying. Either he's going to be with the team
account.
Or they're going to trade him, and I get that, but if that's the case, just hit the mute, and it takes it right out of your timeline. Like that's all you have to do. You don't have to unfollow him. But you're absolutely right. He knew exactly the kind of attention that it was going to draw. Like he can sit there and say that people place too much value on what you're doing on social media, but he knew, like he's of that age. He knows exactly how much importance, like especially people in his age demographic and the media are going to place
100%.
on that.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And if you really, just wanted to, get away from it, then delete your account or
there's that too.
Or just delete the app. Delete the app on your phone so that you're not getting the notifications and everything else, but you didn't delete your account. It's still there, whatever.
And a lot of the Notre Dame players, at least they tell, they'll talk about it without even being asked about it. They talk about how they, especially during the season, they'll delete the app from their phone and, just completely remove themselves from it.
Pretty
intelligent. They're not told they have to, but a lot of them do it just so that they're not getting, because, let's face it, one bad game. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people, who blow up these guys' social media accounts with a lot of different BS, right? So they just remove themselves from it. And that would be the thing to do.
Smartest thing to do.
Yeah.
Smartest thing to do. So no, I don't buy any of that nonsense. None of it.
So the Cubs have agreed
finally
to a contract with Mr. Cody Bellinger over the weekend, $80 million for 3 years. Do you buy or sell your Chicago Cubs, Vince D'Addario, as a legit contender after locking up Cody Bellinger?
They are a legit contender in the Central. That's as far as I'm willing to go. And if you're a legit contender in your division, then that means you make the playoffs, right? And if you're in, you got to be at the dance in order to get the girl. So that gets them in the dance. And so I think they've got the second best odds behind the Cardinals to win the division, right? And I think that's exactly where they need to be. I think they got a great coach. I think they've got a lot of pieces. I do. I think they have a lot of pieces. Now, a lot of those pieces are going to have to perform to the best of their ability. You can't have a bunch of injuries because they're not. I don't think that they're deep enough, even though their farm system is loaded, but those guys aren't all ready to be major leaguers. So, yes, they are contenders, but a lot of things have to go their way too. Does that make sense? Like, no, I like Craig Counsell. I think he's going to put the pieces where they need to go and be competitive all season long.
And it's not like Craig Counsell has not had some good players in Milwaukee, but he had, in part because of what the division is, but also in part because of the way he manages. He kept the Milwaukee Brewers contenders with lower payrolls
and less talent.
And
absolutely
less talent overall than teams like the Cubs and the Cardinals the last few years. So I think it starts with him, but having Bellinger is definitely a good bedrock piece. And I agree. I think that's a good way to put it. I would consider them at least legit contenders in the Central. And because if you win your division, that makes you a legit contender in your league. So I think they're legit. But to me, it starts with Craig Counsell. I think that it's a step up. By the way, I think it's odd. Like, David Ross was doing TV, and I thought he was pretty good at TV.
It was Sunday Night
before
Baseball.
He became a manager. Is he doing? I haven't heard anything about him potentially doing any ESPN or anything like that this year.
I haven't heard anything. Maybe. I mean, I think there was still some time on his contract, so he's probably still getting paid. But yeah, I'm a little surprised myself, to be honest with you, because I thought he was very good. I thought he was very good, to be honest with you.
Maybe he's a little shell-shocked, after getting canned by the Cubs. Maybe he doesn't want that public, or I don't know.
I looked up. I just Googled David Ross and I hit news. So it brings up like the most recent news. It's all from November, like when they kind of made this move, and so getting him out and bringing in Craig Counsell. So, yeah.
Jesse was always pretty down on David Ross. I never felt like the teams that he managed. Never felt like the organization was fully invested in giving him his best team. But there are a lot of micro moves that, as the manager, that again, like if my choice is Craig Counsell or David Ross, I'm going to take Counsell every day of the week because Counsell has already proven himself to be a superior game manager.
If we're comparing the two, I mean, Craig Counsell wins the battle of better manager. There's no doubt about that. I also agree with you, though, that David Ross wasn't given all the tools to be successful either. Like, I mean, when he first took over, I mean, he had some crap rosters. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. And, he had to be the manager during COVID and all these different things. And so he had a lot of the deck was stacked against him. I'm still a David Ross fan. I loved him when he was a player. I thought he did a decent job as a manager.
I think he's a good guy, solid manager.
Yeah, and I think that's fair.
But I don't think he's a great manager.
I think that's fair. Honestly, I think if he goes and maybe takes a bench coach job someplace, I heard the Yankees offered him a bench coaching job and he turned it down because he wants to be a manager. I think that could have been a good move for him. Go be a bench coach for a couple of years, get another manager's job, and I think that's where he could potentially excel.
I just remember. Do you remember when I interviewed him a few years back when he was doing Dancing with the Stars over on the radio?
Oh, I do remember that.
Still.
I do. I just
remembered that I did, because and I think it was one of those, the Dancing with the Stars publicists or whatever. It was one of those like we got 10 minutes with him, and my radio partner said, "I don't know anything about Dancing with the Stars." You do. Pop culture. So. But we had fun with it. It was a lot of fun.
That's hilarious.
Because back then we were still like as a family, especially when David Ross was on. I remember that season, and then that opportunity came up. So that was a lot of fun.
You got to take it.
He was a good guy. He had fun with it. So,
and that's the thing. I think he's a good guy. I think he's a genuine guy. I think what you see is what you get with David Ross, because I think he was the same when he was a player. I think he was the same when he was on TV doing like Sunday Night Baseball. And I think he was the same as a manager. So I think he is genuinely a good guy.
I concur. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. We've been at it for a while. We went even longer than I thought we were going to go tonight. But you told me when I sent you the outline, this has the potential to go for a while. And it absolutely did. So nothing wrong with that. All right. He's Vince. I'm Sean. We're going to wrap it up with that. Hope everybody enjoyed their time with us tonight. Hit the like button before you leave. I'm not sure what's going on tomorrow for a show yet. I guarantee we will be back Wednesday. My wife broke her ankle last week, so she has to have surgery on that. She's having some screws and stuff, put in her ankle.
That sounds
tomorrow.
horrible.
So I've got to, take her up there and, get her past the drugs and all that kind of stuff. Get her in the house when she gets home and, all that different kind of stuff.
You got to be the nurse for the nurse.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I'll be
see how much of a patient she is.
Yes. And based on the fact that she's been home the last week with a cast on it, not a very good patient. Sit down. Remember, you're home for a reason. Sit down. Yes.
Oh, gosh.
Appreciate it, Paul. Thank you very much. And I will pass that along. So we will talk to you. Vince and I will be back on Wednesday, and we will talk to you then on IB Nation Sports Talk.